Much has been written, filmed, podcasted all about Diablo IV. By most, if not all accounts, the game is close to a masterpiece. But once again, the question remains about accessibility. Can it be playable for disabled players? We've had 4 major releases just in the past month, with Jedi Survivor being the most accessible Star Wars game to date, and Street Fighter VI being the most accessible fighting game to date. Zelda, well, I mean, not so much, as Nintendo's gonna Nintendo, but is Diablo the most accessible game in the franchise? And potentially the most accessible game Blizzard has ever made? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Steve Saylor, I'm blind, and I play video games. To find out how, click here or in the description down below. Also hit the like and subscribe buttons for more videos. Alright, now I should say before getting started that I didn't receive a review code of Diablo IV, so this is based on the early access period I've had when I purchased the deluxe edition. So if there are any accessibility barriers as part of the end game that Blizzard is looking to focus future support on, I can't comment on that based on where I'm at in the game. That being said though, I have to admit, this is my first true Diablo experience. I did play around with Diablo 2 Resurrected last year, however, it wasn't as accessible as I wanted it to be. But after hearing about the improvements Blizzard has made, as well as thoughts from the community during the open beta demos of Diablo 4, I got more excited about the potential of this being my first accessible Diablo experience. And boy, oh boy, was I pleasantly surprised at what the game had, and also a little bit of what it didn't have for accessibility. First, let's start off with motor accessibility. You can rebind on PC as you normally would with up to 2 buttons per action. You also still need to move your mouse pointer around the screen to the area where you want your character to go, but you can rebind the left mouse button to any button so you don't have the repetitive click of the mouse button to move. On console, you can also rebind on controller, but the movement is on the left thumbstick, and you can also swap which thumbstick you use for movement, which is really nice. There are other design decisions that help with motor disabled players as well as other disabilities, such as auto pickup for any coins or materials you walk across in game, so you don't have to constantly click to pick those up. You do still have to pick up any gear related items, but I actually do find that understandable, as you have a limited inventory anyway, and you can be selective on what gear and weapons you do pick up. Also, there is the ability to have both interact and your basic attack be the same button, or you can rebind those 2 actions to its own button separately, which is really, really cool. For deaf and hard of hearing players, you can adjust the size, color, and background of subtitles. The main cinematics don't have speaker labels, but the in-game cinematics do. There are moments where on the largest font size, you'll have a line or 2 that is on more than 2 lines, but it's not often. Most attacks can be seen with a visualization of the attack happening off camera, but in some situations, if there is an enemy nearby, there is an audio cue to hear it coming. But for deaf players, how you can tell that they are in range or have spotted you is there actually is a little health bar that will appear at the top of the screen when the enemy is in view. I don't think that's what it was intended for, but sometimes I even personally used it as a way to tell if an enemy was about to attack nearby. Also, sadly, the environmental sound effects of conversations, there are whispered voices or screams, are not captioned, which does take away from some of the gothic aesthetic of the game. Try saying that 2 times fast. For cognitive accessibility, while these types of RPGs can be overwhelming, the game does a pretty decent job at onboarding folks old and new to the world of Diablo. Because this is a more cinematic experience than previous Diablo titles, there is a lot that is added to help new players jump in even if they've never touched a Diablo game before. There is a tutorialized beginning quest that at first I thought was going to be separate from the game, and then once you learn everything, you are then brought into the main story of the game. But the tutorialized parts is very much a part of the story. But if you are an experienced veteran at Diablo, you can also jump in without all the onboarding. You can also set your difficulty from adventurer to veteran, and then unlock even more difficulty modes later on. But if you're really bold, each difficulty level all has the ability to turn on a permadeath mode. So if you die in the game, you have to start over with a brand new character. There are options that help multiple disabilities, including cognitive, such as you can disable the camera shake, enabling or disabling combat flash, reduce strobing effects, show all tutorials, and advanced tooltip compare that will actually show you when you are comparing gear in your inventory to what you have equipped, what you will lose or gain when equipping that new item. It's actually kind of a really nice touch that I appreciated. You can also enable labels above each item, gear, or weapon you can find, and you can change the HUD from the traditional center to the new left corner configuration. I personally like the center HUD as it was easier to see at a glance, but you know, your use case may vary. Lastly, I want to focus on the blind accessibility because I think this is where Diablo has had the most improvement in. First up, they have a very decent screen reader. With the amount of reviews I've done recently where there hasn't been a screen reader, this is a welcome change and a very nice surprise. Now also, I found in most games that actually do have a screen reader, it can feel clunky and sort of half-baked. Some things are read and some things aren't. Some only read important info and miss everything else, or it tries to read everything, but the order as to what it reads is not super intuitive. So often if a game has a clunky screen reader, I sometimes actually turn it off because it's more distracting than helping. But in Diablo 4, this screen reader is actually very smooth.
Vein, fathers, or vein. Bottom action button. Interact. Containers. Eastern Pass. LV. 6. Determined helm. Magic helm. 86 item power. 108 armor, plus 108.
It does miss a few areas where it doesn't read in-game menu headings, so it can be hard to know which menu you are in, and sometimes when comparing gear stats, it can be a lot being read at you, and if you close the menu while it's reading, it'll still continue until something else pops up on screen and the screen reader interrupts itself to read it. That's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way, just a lot of info that is thrown at you because here's the thing, if you're blind, you can't actually read at a glance, so you don't know how irrelevant a stat is until it is read all the way through. So I'd say the screen reader is helpful about 85% of the time, and that's saying something compared to other games. Other notable areas of improvement for blind players are there are highlights around yourself, targeted enemies, and objects, which has sort of a kind of built-in high contrast mode, which is actually really nice. I would like to see the highlights actually stand out a bit more, but otherwise it is pretty decent. The default text size, and I want to emphasize something. The default text size is set to large. That's right. I said large. That is consistent across all text on screen. In some areas it can be hard to read more based on contrast, and I would have liked to have seen an extra large text setting to fit my needs, but it is much easier to read compared to previous Diablo titles, so I'm very happy with what we have so far. There are also audio cues for items and gear pickups. You can not only hear cues for individual item types such as health potions, gold, gear, materials, weapons, etc., and you can enable them for dropped items from enemies or just nearby items or both.
Cask. Bottom action button. Interact.
I do wish there was some sort of directional sound with some of the audio cues, and it would have been great to have an audio cue glossary so you know what item type, but again, I'm still impressed that this option is even here in the first place. Those are just some of the options that help, but there are little touches too, such as if you're in a dark place, your path in front of you is highlighted almost like you have a flashlight in front of you. That's a very nice touch to see if you missed anything on the ground in the direction your character is facing. Another nice touch is the labels above the items, gear, characters, and enemies you see all have a background to them, so they stand out more and basically have a better contrast. Sadly, the other player characters you encounter don't have that for their name labels above their heads, so I hope that improves, but otherwise, it was a nice design touch. Also, another nice touch is that if you track or add a waypoint in the map, there will be a highlighted path to take that you can see in the mini-map so you can know where best to go. Which brings me to what I think is actually the biggest thing missing from making this an amazingly blind accessible game, and that is there is no navigational assistance. While yes, you can highlight places on the map, like I said, of where to go, there's no audio or camera button to point you in the right direction. The map is mostly filled with pathways instead of open areas, so you won't really fall off a cliff or lose all sense of direction, but you will be hugging the walls, quote unquote, of the path in the game a lot, unless you have someone you are playing with providing sighted assistance, which is honestly a fair solution, and there is still a lot there for blind accessibility that a blind player can feel like that they can contribute to the group with minimal help, but the lack of navigational assistance is a big factor in preventing a blind player from being able to play solo. Now, to be honest, when looking at the bigger picture of all the accessibility in Diablo 4, a lot of my critiques are mostly just quality of life concerns that I hope can be updated or added in the future. With Blizzard's plans to support the game longer term by adding seasonal content, the Blizzard team created a solid foundation to build on, and I hope that continues moving forward. At launch, this game hits a very high note for accessibility in not only franchise history, but in studio history as well. Overwatch was the closest disabled players have had when it comes to an accessible experience from Blizzard, and now I believe Diablo 4 surpasses that. It's not perfect, but it's better than before, and I can't wait to see what the accessibility team does next. I give Diablo 4 for accessibility a 3.5 out of 5. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions that I didn't answer in this review, and there was a lot that I didn't cover in this, so if you do have any questions, please leave a comment down below, and I will do my best to answer based on my play experience. Also, while you're down there, could you do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons? It would really help to keep this channel growing so I can do more cool stuff in the future. Thanks again, and as always, I remain obediently yours. Bye-bye.